Hello, everyone.
Hello.
It's a pleasure seeing you online. I hope soon we will be able to move to more live events, but on the other hand, it is really good that we learned how to use the technologies over the last couple of years and can also connect easily and sometimes more effectively online. While we have more participants joining, I think our first speakers are all here, and I would like to invite everyone to start today's event and dive right to it. The Georgia-Moldova-Armenia Forum: How will the war in Ukraine reshape democracy and governance in the Eastern Partnership region? This is the event that is bringing together three partner organizations: Georgian Institute of Politics, the Institute for European Policies and Reforms from Moldova, and Analytical Center on Globalization and Regional Cooperation from Armenia. I would like to thank very much our partners for contributing to both this event, but also a year-long cooperation. Those who might not know, today's event is a culmination and ending note of a project, Eastern Partnership Cooperation for Stronger Democracy, Georgia, Moldova, and Armenia, that was supported by MATRA program from the Netherlands Fund for Regional Partnerships, and that has been running for almost a year now. During the project, we had a unique opportunity to stay in touch, to regularly hold discussions, write policy papers, policy briefs, op-eds, and share it between each other, and really learn more and will keep the pulse of the reforms, of the challenges, of the progress in Georgia, Armenia, and Moldova. And I would like to really thank our donor, the Netherlands government, for this opportunity. Today's event will include two topics. It is somewhat symbolic that we started at a time when elections were on the agenda in all three countries. And a year after, we are still talking about democracy reforms, but also about European integration, and about what has been well done and achieved during the last year. Today's first panel will focus on EU integration and its effects on good governance and democratic processes in the Eastern Partnership, featuring the countries in focus. And the second panel today will address the difficulties and the challenges in the region, well, the elephant in the room really, the war in Ukraine, and how it might impact the future of Eastern Partnership. Without further ado, I would like to invite for the opening remarks Her Excellency Maaike van Koldam, Ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Georgia, and well, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Renata. Thank you for giving me the floor. And as you say, we still struggle with all these technicalities, and that is a surprise to me. After 2 years of COVID, I have to reinvent Zoom, which is kind of weird, but I'm happy to be with you. I say a big thank you to the Georgian Institute for Politics, for the Analytical Center on Globalization and Regional Cooperation in Armenia, and the Institute for European Policies and Reforms in Moldova. I also greet my colleague, Floris. Nice to see you virtually, Floris. We are very happy with this project because it was a kind of pilot from our MATRA project, that we have MATRA projects at embassies, but also from headquarters, regional MATRA projects for transformation in societies through working with NGOs and think tanks. And I think you were a pilot and a very successful one. And I'm really happy to be speaking to you because you being together discussing this very important topic is already a proof of result. And indeed, as you say, who would have thought at the start of this project, I think last year, that Russia would invade Ukraine, start this horrible, horrible war that's now 24 hours a day on our minds, on everybody's minds, a war and violence that we condemn in the strongest possible terms, and that has united even more, I think, all of us, all of our countries, to act against Russian aggression and support our Ukrainian friends. And on how that will reshape, well, I expect that this will only make all of us stronger, because it shows, to my mind, the best defense against outward aggression is to be united, to have a stable democratic state, to stand together and not to be overly polarized. A healthy debate is always good, but to find a common goal and strive towards it. And that is what we very much would like to support. And it's, of course, the war in Ukraine that makes it even more acute. Just briefly on the country where I'm posted, Georgia, already before the war, there is the Russian neighbor, there is the constant security threat in a way, and therefore the need to indeed solidify your rule of law institutions. And in that respect, we've seen progress. We've also seen some setbacks, which are indeed remain the challenges. I only mention 5th of July last year, with the violence against Pride and journalists, which still, not only the perpetrators, but also the organizers of which need to be investigated and prosecuted. And that was an event that really cast a shadow over our EU-Georgia relationship. But we are in a dialogue with Georgia. We see somewhat an improvement in public opinion on this topic. So always look at the bright side of things, but there's things that need to be worked on. Likewise, judicial reform, but first and foremost, I think, to overcome political polarization. And I think here you play an important role, as of course all politicians have their own responsibility. We as embassy try to support where we can, and we find what you are doing very crucial. And the one thing that we do see, and is one of those bright sides, that it seems to me, NGOs, civil society, think tanks, you all stand united to on this goal to solidify and further enhance democratic reforms. And I can't thank you enough for doing that. We are proud supporters of your efforts, and I particularly thank Renate and Corneli for your the way you implemented this project. And I think all the analytical and well, we're going to listen to your brains and your efforts. And the beauty of this project is that we live in different countries, we work in different countries, there's different contexts, but we can always learn from each other. And likewise, the Netherlands can also learn from you. So that's my opening words, and looking forward to the discussion, which I can partially attend, and I have to unfortunately go to another event, but all towards further enhancing democratic reforms. Thanks very much. Thank you also for the distinguished speakers who join us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words. And I would also like to invite Mr. Floris van Eijk, acting ambassador of the Kingdom of Netherlands to Moldova. We are very happy to have you here as well today. Just as Ambassador said, yes, we we do work in different countries, live in different countries, but there is a lot to share. So thank you for being here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and very good to all dear colleagues, experts, friends. I think this is a very beautiful project. Very important project. I really thought that when we started it, when we were together in a similar setting, discussing, you know, challenges of further European integration. And I think that the events we have seen in our region since the 20th of have only underlined the importance of this. Of course, for a very unfortunate reason, the Russian invasion in Ukraine, but all the challenges forms in our three countries have only been highlighted. The case of Moldova, of course, security threat is there. Maybe not as imminent as the first days of the war. It doesn't look militarily strategically like the Russian troops will reach the Moldovan border within a matter of days, but within a matter of weeks, and you never know, and you have to prepare for that. And the vulnerabilities that have always been there, like the dependence, the cyber threats, the importance of have only been highlighted by the event, fortunately, since the 24th. So this is, of course, worrying. This is something that the government has to address, that the civil society has to contribute to finding solutions to those threats. But at the same time, it gives us momentum. That is really what you feel in Moldova. The experiment that was started in August by the pro-European minded Gabriel Litzak was, of course, a little bit affected because it have been diverted to refugee, strengthen the border controls, etc. But I think that everybody in Moldova also realizes now how important it has gained some momentum. And now in recent weeks, we read advances on the justice sector reform. We see advances on a strategy that is diversifying the waste reduction, energy reduction. It is about renewables. It's about alternative sources. Those are very interesting processes that have actually, because of the horrible events. Now, is it going to be an easy fight? No, absolutely not. I think we live in this world, and Moldova feels this just like Georgia and Armenia, even more than the rest of Europe. So it is of course not going to be, but I think there is this understanding that we have to strengthen of the country, and that the strengthen the resilience, strengthen the democracy and the transparency, and make sure that people participate in the governance. I think this kind of discussions is very. I think that the civil society organizations play a key role in convincing the people of the merits of democracy and human rights. I think they feed the government with creative ideas. We have seen this very clearly in the case of Moldova. Good cooperation between society and the government, and a lot of the from the civil society are now being applied by the government. So basically, I don't want to extend too much. I just wish very good discussion, and I want to underline how important it is that we are having these discussions, that we are exchanging experience, not only within our country, but especially between our countries. In Georgia, Moldova, Armenia, who are faced with similar threats in slightly different situations, I think you can relate to each other quite a lot. Very helpful for us and to exchange experience. So I'll leave it at that. Very good panel discussion. Thanks again for the organization of this two organizations. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the motivation and for your introductory words. Now I would like to give the floor to our first moderator of the first panel, Anastasia Pontiumyan. who is a research fellow at DGAP. And the first panel will focus on EU integration and its effects on good governance and democratic processes in the Eastern Partnership. Before we start with the panel and with the discussions, I would like to also encourage everyone to use the chats as well as the Q&A to ask questions, to start discussions, to engage actively. Please feel free to use this platform so that we have communication among each other and engagement throughout the whole event. And now, well, the first panel is to begin, and here, Anastasia, floor is yours.
Thank you, Renata. I'm very glad to be here and to see many familiar faces, and also to be a moderator at this important panel. I will introduce the speakers. We have here Stepan Grigoryan. He's the chairman of the board of the Analytical Center of Globalization and Regional Cooperation. We have Julian Groza, who's the executive director at the Institute for European Policies and Reforms, IPRE in Moldova. And we have Shota Kokadze, who's a junior policy analyst at the Georgia Institute of Politics. Each of the panelists will have around 5 minutes, and we'll have some questions afterwards. So please, as Renata already mentioned, write your questions in the chat or just raise your hand. And I would especially like to encourage women to address questions, so we have more balance in foreign policy, which is sometimes lacking. And now to proceed to the panel. So we are on the 78th day of the war, and a lot has been shifted in the region. And we see that Moldova has just submitted yesterday the full application for the membership, and Ukraine did it, I think, on the 10th of May. And a lot has been happening. And in this context, also talking about good governance and democratization is really interesting, as it has been a bit, maybe so to say, put on hold while security, the issues of security, the issues of migration and economic have prevailed. Therefore, I would like to start with asking each of the panelists to maybe speak briefly for 5 minutes. What has changed and what is happening with good governance and democratization, considering the developments in the region and how the war in Ukraine has affected it. And I would like to start with Dr. Stepan Grigoryan. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anastasia. Dear friends, dear colleagues, it's an honor for me to address such an audience. Moreover, the topic of our conference is extremely relevant for countries that have chosen a democratic path of development. It's already clear that only 4 Eastern Partnership countries, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and Armenia, are following the democratic way of development. Ensuring security for them should be a priority for the EU. As you know, security has become one of the most important components in the Eastern Partnership initiative since 2008. Security in this EU initiative included border management, countering illegal migration and organized crime. The new EU document of EAP, adopted in 2017, supplemented it with cybersecurity, resisting hybrid threats, chemical and biological threats, and emergencies. On December 15, 2021, the 6th Eastern Partnership Summit was held in Brussels. Security issues received an important role in the final declaration of the summit. Thus, the document speaks of the intention to support the peaceful resolution of conflict as well as to prevent them. The communiqué at this summit also speaks of strengthening cooperation in the field of security, as well as practical cooperation with the framework of the common security and defense policy of the EU. Particularly, attention is paid to exercises on cybersecurity and resisting hybrid threats. Indeed, throughout its history, the EAP has not played a major role in attempts to resolve conflicts. I mean, first of all, Karabakh conflict. But the 6th Eastern Partnership Summit demonstrated that the situation has begun to change. Thus, at the initiative of Charles Michel, 3 meetings have already been held between Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. At the initiative of Charles Michel, it was possible to establish a direct line of communication between the defense ministers of both countries. Now the head of the European Council has offered EU assistance in the delimitation and demarcation of the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. In fact, the EU-Armenia-Azerbaijan format has become an essential element in resolving the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and normalizing Azerbaijani-Armenian relations. On March 24, 2022, the EU leadership discussed with US President Joe Biden issues of transatlantic cooperation in the context of Russian military aggression against Ukraine. The EU demanded that Russia immediately stop military aggression against Ukraine, attack on civilian objects, and guarantee safe humanitarian corridors. The EU has said it will be continue to provide coordinated political, financial, material, and humanitarian support to Ukraine, and will be ready to take tough new sanctions against Russia and Belarus to stop the war. Thus, we see that in the EU, there is an understanding that it's necessary to protect the young democracies formed in Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, and Armenia, because these democracies are under attack from neighboring authoritarian regime. I also want to note that in the last half year, the Armenian government has negotiated and signed serious agreements with French, Germany, USA, Italy, Great Britain, Lithuania, Poland, Georgia, and last official visit had our Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan in Netherlands. We see the desire of the Armenian authorities to diversify issues of security, defense, energy. During my meeting with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan on May 2 this year, he expressed his serious interest in Georgia getting the status of an EU candidate. This is a very good sign for all of us. And in conclusion, I want to say that in the past 2 weeks, the Armenian pro-Russia parliamentary opposition began protests demanding the resignation of Nikol Pashinyan. The main slogans of the radical opposition are no Turkization of Armenia, Armenia without Nikol, and so on. Unfortunately, the opposition does not offer any program to address current issue, but only blocks the streets and transport communication. In this process, the hand of Kremlin is very visible, which very skillfully uses the maximalist demands of Azerbaijan to destabilize the situation in Armenia. Unfortunately, leader of Russia cannot forgive Nikol Pashinyan for his revolutionary past. Therefore, he is doing everything to change the government in Armenia and bring pro-Russia political forces to power. And I finish. I want to say we have a level of freedoms in Armenia. It will be need to keep to fight against so pressure process from big power as is Russia. And we have a chance to construct normal country and will start cooperation in our region. I mean, and Eastern Partnership region and South Caucasus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. if I just allow to ask myself one follow-up question to what you mentioned. So reflecting on the moods in Armenia and the recent demonstrations, but also the situation in Ukraine, I wanted to ask you, what do you think, has anything changed in the discourse that exists towards the application of closer relations with the EU, considering that Georgia has applied for a membership? Do you think there is any shift in the debate, and how is it reflected in the society? Is like Armenia feeling more disappointed that the EU has not offered previously support to Armenia and now is being very supportive to Ukraine, or on the contrary, is there more desire to become closer to the EU? What would be your assessment?
Thank you. No, first of all, I want to say that it's positive that official position Armenian government in this last time changed. You know, before a long time, this last 5-6 years, Armenian government voted in UN General Assemblies, voted against Ukrainian, Georgian resolutions. Now we see positive tendencies when our government abstains on this process. It's a positive way. Armenian new ambassador in Lithuania 1 day ago was in Ukrainian embassy in Lithuania and did very serious statements. What I want to say, Armenia step by step transfers, changes its policy, and I want to say so, wants to diversify its policy, include foreign policy. Don't connect everything only with Russia. And you see our voting process, you saw in UN General Assembly. This is first. Second, I want to say our civil society, big part of our civil society has position pro-Ukrainian. Our organization, together with Ukraine minorities in Armenia, organized protest actions against the war and so on. This is very positive tendencies. But I want to say, to us, it's very important if Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine will be closer with EU, will be start to be candidate. This is my message to Europeans, our partners, EU members, countries, officials, experts. It will be need to incorporate closer Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine. In this case, will open the doors and to Armenia. Why I was happy when I listened what said Prime Minister, how reacted Prime Minister in our meeting, that he has positive view on a Georgian way to be candidate in EU.
Thank you. I will move to Julian. So Julian, Moldova just submitted the final application for the EU candidate status yesterday. However, as we know, also the questionnaire, unlike in Georgia, was not published in Moldova. But overall, and Moldova is at the moment also dealing with 4 crises. As we know, the migration crisis, the still ongoing COVID crisis, and the economic crisis, and then now there are the provocations in Transnistria. So amid this background, the government managed to fill the questionnaire. However, what is going on? I will wait for you to be back. A little break, I think you're here. So what is going on with the democratization? What do you think, and the governance? Where do you think it stands, and what are currently the main achievements of the Moldovan government, but also where Moldova is maybe lagging behind? And you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Anastasia, for the questions and for the introduction. And from the very beginning, I'd like to thank Renata and the whole Georgian Institute of Politics team, Corneli, for the great partnership and work we have done over the last year together with with Stepan and his team. I also would like to thank Dutch government, the embassy in Tbilisi, and our friends embassy in Chisinau, and other partners for believing in us, for supporting our work, because we indeed try to contribute to an effective policy, multi-stakeholder effort, which would indeed benefit our countries and our citizens. So I'll start with, I think, the most important aspect. Russia's war against Ukraine has a highly destabilizing element for Moldova as well. Even though Moldova is not under conventional aggression from Russia, Moldova is and has been for some time under hybrid aggression from Russia using various tools. And of course, the war is very close to us. And Moldova was very close to Ukraine in terms of our contribution of solidarity, but also trying to help with what we can. Over 450 thousands of refugees fleeing neighboring Ukraine entered Moldova, and around 9,500 of Ukrainian fellows chose to stay here in Moldova. And the number of refugees in Moldova received from Ukraine today represent about 3.5% top up of our population. And this is indeed an important effort that Moldova is currently doing for our Ukrainian fellows. And we have seen that, well, even though being a small country, I think Moldovan citizens community has proved to have quite a big heart, and trying to do whatever we can to provide support to Ukraine. To the Ukrainian army, in particular, to the men who are fighting today, who are resisting the aggression of Russia in Ukraine. And Moldova was already for some time under multiple crises, the pandemic, the economic impact of the pandemic, the energy crisis that has very much impacted our economy. And already before the war started, Moldova was already a very challenging economic situation. We now face quite high inflation. We now, according to the projections, we would face most likely a recession towards the end of this year. And of course, all of that needs more effort, more support, more creative, more targeted efforts on behalf of the authorities here in Moldova. But more importantly, support coming from our partners, from our international partners, not only to manage the humanitarian crisis or to address the economic crisis and increase our resilience, but also to enhance our security, which has been exposed very much. Moldova is a fragile country. Unfortunately, for years, elites in Moldova have not dedicated enough effort and attention to increase our defense capabilities, security capabilities. Neutrality, maybe it works in times of peace, but it's not a guarantee in times of war. And that means that I think Moldova needs to focus very much in enhancing our security capabilities. And Moldova needs a EU resilience support, resilience package, which would address those constraints and those issues, targeting our capacities to ensure public order and security, in particular when looking at addressing the challenges of smuggling of various insecurity risks in terms of on our borders. And today already, Moldova has been supported by Frontex, very much by EU-bound mission to address the shortage. But of course, Moldova needs more than that. It is really important it's really important for Moldova also to engage and to have a more active mutual intelligence sharing exchange with our international partners to make sure that we can complement the understanding of the risks and threats for us, especially in this time. But more importantly, I think Moldova needs a very clear and very timely security audit. We need to address the gaps in the security sector of Moldova. And I think here what it is important is that we are supported in this effort and try to increase the capacities and the resilience of our country, of our security. Today, Moldova is already basically very much advancing in terms of our dialogue with the European Union in terms of the security. We have launched in March a high-level security dialogue. Moldova is benefiting already from a European peace facility. But I think more can be done, and Moldova can also further expand its cooperation, in particular being invited in more PESCO programs of the European Union. Last week, as a response to Moldova's needs and requests, EU has already started to dispatch very targeted support in terms of addressing our cyber security, cyber resilience, countering disinformation, which has been one of the instruments that hybrid aggression of Russia has been instrumentalized here in Moldova. And as I said, all in all, I think given the impact of the various crises that Moldova is in, I think for the country is very much important to look into addressing medium to long-term needs in terms of going beyond and managing the economic crisis, but also addressing our economic energy resilience. Early March, we had in Berlin a conference, starting basically a pledging conference, support platform for Moldova, started by our friends in Romania, France, and Germany. I think that was already a good contribution for building up this resilience package for Moldova. And yeah, I mean, beyond the various challenges in which we are, I think what it is important to outline is that in Moldova we have a government that is very much committed to systemic reforms and addressing the shortages and the challenges of our justice system, the impunity, the high-level corruption challenges. I think this is something which is very top still on the agenda, and we just started the pre-vetting mechanism in the country, which will have to prepare our self-governing bodies in the judiciary and the prosecutor system to participate in the hard vetting, which would start soon after that. I think that is something which is very important, but it is even more important that Moldova gets full support from our partners. EU, US, Netherlands is one of the active contributors and supporters of this reform. And we, as a think tank, we also can contribute to this mechanism, but also we're trying to look into the needs, into the gaps, into the capacities that need to be enforced and increased of our justice and anti-corruption actors to expedite on investigations, on sanctioning of high-level corruption, and addressing at the end of the day the impunity. Finally, what I want to mention, of course, Anastasia mentioned the fact that Moldova today, or yesterday actually, made another step towards on our European way. Moldova has submitted the final part of the answers for the questionnaire of the European Commission that is currently conducting the screening and evaluation of our system, legislation, our capacity to meet the economic and political criteria. And of course, we're looking forward for the Commission's opinion and to the discussions in the Council soon this summer in June. What it is really important, I think, to mention here is that Moldova managed to do in a rather short notice, just like other colleagues from Georgia and Ukraine, to submit this questionnaire. I have to be frank with you. I was quite skeptical that we will be moving so fast. But I think what proved the whole exercise in Moldova, in particular, that we had a very clear objective. We had a very clear mobilizing factor, which managed to actually mobilize the whole capacities we have in country and outside the country. The effort was very much inclusive. Think tanks, civil society experts have been participating in the contribution and revision of the answers of Moldova to the questions provided by the Commission. We had very important contribution also from diaspora experts and our friends from all over the world and Europe. Romania basically was very much helping us as well with the expertise to make sure that we have a peer review properly answers which would help us to advance and to progress in our endeavors. So finally, I think what is important for all of us when discussions in the European Union takes place, I think the current war, the crisis, the aggression of Russia on Ukraine, I think, and we all aware about that, have changed a lot in the minds of policymakers, of people in the European Union in particular. And I think now is the time for the policymakers, for EU member states to really give a very clear political promise and signal to Ukraine that Ukraine can be part of the European Union. Moldova as well, because Moldova feels the security, the insecurities, but at the same time, Moldova merits, deserves to get a clear membership perspective and candidate status to advance towards the objective of becoming member of the European Union, because that would influence not only our domestic agenda and will provide additional topics for very targeted, very concrete and pro-reform debates inside the country between various stakeholders in the country. But more importantly, that would help Moldova to transform itself, to better integrate with the European Union. And I think at this stage, we are already advancing quite well, thanks to the association agreement and the fact that Moldova is very much part of the Western Balkans formats, RCC, South Eastern Cooperation Process, CEFTA. And what differs today Moldova from Western Balkans, there are two things: a clear membership perspective and adjusted structural funds of IPA. And I think that is important, in particular these times, to receive that very clear perspective, and together with Ukraine and Georgia to pave our way with the support of all of our friends and partners in the European Union towards becoming a full member of the European Union in foreseeable future, whenever we are ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. I have some questions, but I will leave them to the end because we also have some questions in the chat. And because of the time restraints, I'll pass it to Shota. Hi, Shota. Yeah, I would also like you to reflect in the 5 minutes that you've got about the developments in Georgia, and also on the political situation a bit. And is like Georgia has submitted the questionnaire and the answers to the questionnaire for the EU candidate status, but is Georgia ready to join the EU and to get the status? So I'd like you to also reflect a bit on this question, taking into consideration the political developments in the country and in the region, of course. Thank you.
Yeah, many thanks. And first of all, thanks to those who made this event possible and put together this very interesting panel. Well, very briefly, to answer your question, I guess very briefly, I will talk about the context and indeed what the previous speaker also has rightly mentioned, the war in Ukraine, and probably the next panel will get into more details around this issue. But it has in a way changed the Eastern Partnership as it has introduced this, at least the membership status, this candidate status is in a way the membership status, something which EAP was always lacking. And in a way, at least I believe so, the lacking of the membership status has affected the effectiveness of the EAP or reforms in the Eastern Partnership countries. So now this candidate status, I think, could has a potential to give this boost to the Eastern Partnership project. But the future of Eastern Partnership obviously is also the whole another matter and something that should be discussed separately. Well, going back to your question about whether the Georgia is ready or, well, I think Georgia has also submitted the questionnaire, and that is a very important step on this journey of European integration, which Georgia has been going for the last 2 decades at least. So in that sense, this is a very important step. But unfortunately, I do see some challenges on this way, and it has to do with the political elite's maturity, or whether political elite in Georgia generally, regardless of the party, is ready to sacrifice its own narrow interests over the general strategic vision, which is the EU membership. Because at the moment we see this small petty fight between the political parties, which somehow, unfortunately, overrides this general interest or the country's national interest, which is the European integration. So I do see this, well, it's not a small challenge, but a challenge on this way, and probably that is something which needs to be addressed. And we've seen that Georgia has been in a really long political crisis for the last 2 years, even more. And the implication of this political crisis is felt in the media and society, including in the civil society. And it is something we kind of see on this, on Georgia's European integration being affected by this political crisis. And yeah, and the similar goes to this Charles Michel agreement, something that in a way was meant to end this political crisis and help Georgian society in general to find a way out of this crisis and move forward. But unfortunately, again, due to disagreement between the political parties, this agreement failed, and the future for this political crisis is also quite bleak. So I think these small political petty fights do affect Eastern Partnership, Georgia's European future in the long-term perspective. However, I do also think that the candidate status is something that could be granted to Georgia as a symbolic move from the European side, in order to also to show to Russia in the region that European Union is still present in the region and is the neighborhood, and it hasn't disappeared from the region. It would be a signal to Russia, but that would be also a symbolic move. And the membership, that is something that takes more than, you know, just a questionnaire. So I think that's going to take a while. Yeah, that's very briefly, and probably we can engage into questions, and then we can cover some more details during the Q&A session. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. I will start with the questions from the chat. And also, if you have a question, please raise your hand or write the question in the chat or in the Q&A, I think better. So we have 2 questions. One is, which kind of toolkit should be implemented by the EU to contribute to the security and democracy in the EAP countries? It's a question from Johannes, sorry, I'm not seeing everything in the chat, Johannes Margarans. And then we have another question, how would the association trio look at including Armenia in their concerted EU efforts and dialogues? Because it looks like in terms of governance reforms, Armenia would be interested to be on the good side of the Eastern Partnership. And that it seems that in the Dutch political arena, it seems that Georgia risks falling on the map with all the eyes on Ukraine. And I mean, here I would also add my follow-up question, can we still speak about the association trio, or should we refrain? Is still the association trio alive, in fact, with the current developments? So I'll give you each of you maybe just try to be brief, 1-2 minutes, so we have time for a second round of questions. And I'll start in the reverse order with Shota.
Sure. Well, starting with the first question about including Armenia in this. Well, at least I think Dr. Grigoryan will be more competent to answer this question, but my impression is that considering geopolitical interests of two different countries, that is that, Georgia, Ukraine have been always interested more into, getting closer to the European Union and NATO, while Armenia's geopolitical interest was more closely tied to Russian Federation. Probably that might be slightly challenging, but again, I think Dr. Grigoryan will better explain this. And yeah, regarding the question about the associated trio and whether we can still speak of associated trio as a project in the future, well, at least what we have seen so far, I think, is that it is still a very relevant project. And that's why also Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia, they together got this questionnaire, because they are still associated trio. But probably the result of the war is going to change a lot in the region, and the whole Eastern Partnership as a project will be reshaped. But that's something which time will show. So probably, yes, that is something that in the future might change. That will be very briefly my response.
Thank you, Yulian. I pass it to you. I'll also ask you to be brief.
Well, briefly, do we still have an association trio? Yes, we do. Do we still do we have to do more to see how we can better value our association trio framework? Yes, we do. We will see an update of the Eastern Partnership in the context of Russia's aggression on Ukraine. Yes, for sure, we will see that happening, but also we will most likely see the revision of enlargement policy of the European Union. In general, I think we are going through a process of revisions throughout policies, not to mention the security dimension, where we have seen that the war of Russia on Ukraine have changed a lot the perceptions and the actions and decisions of the European Union. Just to mention that for the first time in history, the European Union is providing military support to Ukraine today, something which was never discussed before. But just to remind you that last year there was an initiative of security compacts of the EU towards partners in the region. I think many things from those ideas already are being very concretely considered and already being implemented. I think we will have to see how we can better connect our needs, our security risks, and to the EU's current review of the security policy as well. On as for Armenia, well, I think the fact that Eastern Partnership it provides that inclusiveness and cooperation with other countries, I think, and today's forum also is a proof of that. That we can make sure that we can share and connect willing actors and partners in various mechanisms and processes associated countries have today. I think that is also something that we will continue, but it's really up to Armenia to decide their way towards the European Union. And if Armenia wants to advance towards an associated status, I think this is something which is, again, something which can be supported. But as I said, this is very much a decision of Armenian people and policymakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. And now we pass it to Armenian speaker, to Stepan Grigoryan.
Thank you, Anastasia. Thank you, Yulian. Thank you, Shota, that you reacted on Armenian role in this process. Thank you very much. What I want to say, first of all, I want to say, 3 countries are in an association with EU. They signed association agreement. Armenia signed very serious agreement with EU, in 2017, and this agreement includes reforms, serious reforms, different areas, serious reforms, and so on, but is without free trade part. free trade pact. You know, Armenia in 2013 rejected, former our government, rejected to finally sign association agreement. And this was serious mistake, very serious. We criticized former government, but in any case, we have now good basis to cooperate with EU. And when we can more closer be with EU, when we leave, exit from Eurasia Economic Union. We are member of Eurasia Economic Union. But after this war, Russia aggression against Ukraine, we have a chance to leave this organization. As you know, Kazakhstan started discussions to leave this organization. Kazakhstan signed serious agreements with Turkey, who are the same as Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia has with EU. What it means? Eurasia Economic Union members countries thinks about future and want to leave this organization. Who arises obligations in front of us, but nothing. We have rights. We have obligations, but not rights. Why? I think after some time, it's very realistic to leave this organization and be more closer with EU. And what is interesting, politically, ideologically, we realize some reforms with problems slowly, but we are very closer with Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. It will be need only change situation connecting with free trade. I am sure after this war, when Ukraine will win, destroys Eurasia Economic Union and destroy this not only our countries, include Russia. And finally, when you raised issue, Anastasia, about tools, in Armenia case, it will be need to help us to resolve conflict with Azerbaijan, conflict around Nagorno-Karabakh. And EU role now grows. These tools started to use EU. I welcome this. This is right way. Why? EU and United States want to see South Caucasus as a stable region. Russia uses this conflict to manipulate between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Why it will be need to incorporate EU in this issue? And you know about efforts of Charles Michel, about efforts of EU. I think this is very important tool if EU will continue to be moderator between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
Thank you. Does anyone else, we have a question in the chat that I'm going to read, and I was wondering if anyone else has a question. It's your last chance to ask it. So first we have a question from Ludmila Barba in the context of war in Ukraine, but also the fact that 3 countries have applied for the EU membership. Would it be necessary to revise the Eastern Partnership? And here I would also add a follow-up question. How would the Eastern Partnership go together with the enlargement? What do you think? How would you view this process? I think this is specifically for Julian and Shota. And we have a question also from Badri Koforadze to Dr. Grigoryan. How serious is Armenia's drift from Russian influence towards the EU one? And here I would also maybe allow myself to add a follow-up question. So you mentioned that Armenia could leave the Eurasian unit, but what should happen to trigger this? Like, is there a will from the government to do it? And do you think this is very feasible? So we have 10 minutes. I'll give you each like 2-3 minutes, so then we can also wrap up the discussion. And also, if you would like to add anything else that came to your mind, that's also your chance. Thank you. And maybe I start this time with you, Julian.
Well, I think I would just underline what I tried to indicate also in my previous version as an answer to Ludmila. I mean, we are basically in a situation to see a revision of the Eastern Partnership policy, the neighborhood policy, given the war in Ukraine. As I said, that may go hand in hand with revisions that EU has to conduct also in its other policies, including a large policy. But that is very much subject to political decisions that EU member states are ready to take. And I think now it's very much the right time for the EU member states to give a clear signal that we all learn from our lessons from before, and we start to better understand the need for more tailored, more concrete, and more kind of forward-looking agenda of transformation of our countries, going again beyond resilience, but very much helping our transformation with the support and in the European Union.
Thank you, Shata.
Many thanks. Yeah, it's very hard to add something to what already Yulan said, but I will very briefly also mention that I think the associated trio in the beginning was in a way the attempt to at least reshape a little bit or add some new dimension to Eastern Partnership, because there was already this feeling that with the association agreement, Eastern Partnership has kind of reached its end and there was something new needed. And the associated trio was something new, at least an attempt. In a way, I think the war has showed that yes, indeed, something new is needed, and probably this partnership is going to go through a lot of reforms and changes after the war, and probably also security dimension, something very important, and very often in the literature before it was mentioned, the security dimension was something which Eastern Partnership was also lacking, and probably that dimension is going to be an addition to the project, or at least to those countries who are willing to engage more with the European Union in terms of security. And that will be something that probably is coming after the war. But again, we'll see. It's a bit too early to speak about this, definitely, but we'll see. Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. And Stepan, Grigoryan, pass it to you.
Yes, I think the main way is to Armenia cooperation, active cooperation with the West in defense area and security area. In these cases, will diminish Russia influence on Armenia, and we will have a chance to do independent steps in foreign policy, include in process of voting process in UN, OSCE, in another organization. Why? I see that our today's government wants to do so type positive steps to cooperate with, first of all, with French, with German, with United States in defense areas, with Lithuania, Poland started this work, our government, but you understand, Russia has serious tools to press us. One tool is connecting with pro-Russia position in Armenia. Why they now started protest actions? Armenia started multi-vector foreign policy, started in this last 1 year. Why presses Russia through pro-Russia position, today's government? And second, presses us through Azerbaijan. Uses, manipulates Karabakh issue. And my message is so to government, it will need to continue this job, these meetings, these agreements with democratic countries, democratic systems. And second message to Azerbaijan, it not need to press us so stronger. Russia is serious player, very problematic player. After sometimes they maybe can press Azerbaijan, not Armenia. Why? It will be need to start bilateral contacts with Azerbaijan, and in this case, will open many interesting possibilities to our countries.
Thank you. And if there are no questions, I think we can wrap up at this point, right, Renata, if you confirm. What I would like to summarize is thank you very much for all of you for your important remarks and points, and also reflections on Armenia, Georgia, and Moldova. And what I find interesting is that our panel, and like the main questions also, while they focused on good governance and democratic processes in the region, it's very hard to disentangle it now from the security situation and the ongoing war in Ukraine, and as well its implications. We got now one question in the chat on how the association trio emerged and became, whether it's possible to say that the Eastern Partnership is technically dead. I think the speakers have highlighted that the Eastern Partnership is alive and should continue, even not necessary in this form, that it exists now, but there is a will to continue. So I don't know if we should come back to this question, unless you want to add anything. I believe it was partially answered both by Julian and Shota. I think the conclusion was that the Eastern Association trio and Eastern Partnership should be maintained, but maybe the shape and the form has to change. And I think we will also find out more after the end of June summit, when we will hear more the Commission AV on the application of Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia for the EU membership. So coming back to my conclusions, yes, I think it's very hard to disentangle this part of governance and democracy and reforms at the moment from the existing security situation. And this is what we saw from your remarks and the contributions that you brought. And I would like to thank you all very much, and thank you also for the questions. And I pass it back to Renata.
Thank you, Anastasia, and thank you to all the panelists for your contributions, and the participants for the questions. Now we move to the second part, indeed the topics of democratization and security, they are inseparable in the current context. But the discussion now will focus more on the impact of the war in Ukraine and the future of Eastern Partnership. So this question will be actually probably more addressed now, and then we can come back to it. I would like to give word to moderator of the panel, Anna Guladze, who hails to us from Brussels. She's a PhD candidate at the Free University of Brussels, focusing on civil society engagement with European Union in Eastern neighborhoods. And she has been working on the EU integration issues for quite some time. So I'm really happy to hand the panel into your capable hands, Anna.
Thank you very much, Renata, for introductory remarks. Thanks to GIP for inviting me today to moderate this extremely interesting and important panel. We will have a difficult task ahead, especially after the very insightful first panel, who already touched upon crucial issues of the future of the Eastern Partnership, the link between democratization and security, and the general context of Russia's aggressions towards against Ukraine. I'm joined today with excellent speakers, and I will start with presenting them. So first we have Dr. Sergei Kapanadze, who is the co-founder of Georgian think tank GRAS. He's also a professor at Ilia State University, and he was the member of the parliament from European Georgia Party from 2016-2020. Next, we are happy to be joined by Dr. Sonia Schiffers, who is the director of the Heinrich Böll Foundation Tbilisi office, South Caucasus region since August 2021, and a part of her professional experience. She has impressive academic record, PhD from Free University of Berlin. And finally, we will be joined by Dmitry Shulga from all the way from Kiev. He warned us that he will be a bit late, but hopefully he will be able to join the discussion as we continue our panel. He's the European Program Director at the International Renaissance Foundation, which he joined since 2005. So now let me proceed to our panel, as it was already extensively discussed, and we all know Russia's aggression towards Ukraine fundamentally challenged the Western approach, not only just towards Russia, but also towards its eastern neighborhood. And this changed geopolitical context in which these countries find themselves today questions the relevance of the EU's neighborhood policy, and especially the Eastern Partnership Initiative, which was launched in 2009 and was also a response to Russia's invasion of Georgia in 2008. So fast forward from one war to another, the future of the Eastern Partnership is now at stake. However, we all know that the 6 countries participating in this initiative have never been on the same path. On the one hand, we have the associated trio, and on the other hand, we have Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Belarus, who had very different approaches to the offer of European integration. And even though there are some similarities in the region, all these countries still find themselves in different political, but also geopolitical contexts. So the question of what is next has always been relevant for the Eastern Partnership, especially since the signing of the association agreements. But such developments make us to wonder whether this is the end of the Eastern Partnership Initiative as it is, or is it an opportunity for the EU to rethink and reform the framework to better reflect on the new geopolitical context. With this in mind, I invite our speakers for their introductory remarks for around 5 minutes, after which we will proceed to the Q&A. I also invite and encourage the members of the audience to please write your questions in the Q&A or the chat, or after the remarks from our speakers, please raise your hand and we will proceed to hopefully several rounds of the Q&A. As I want to open the discussion now, my question to our speakers will be whether this is the time to rethink the Eastern Partnership policy, and also how better can the EU reflect this altered geopolitical context in a way to also keep its main goals, which are promoting stability, prosperity, resilience, but also the promotion of democratic reforms in the region. We start with Sergei Gapanadze. Sergei, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna, for the introduction and for raising the issues. Thank you, Renata and GIP, for organizing this, and the Dutch Embassy who is supporting this. So in 5 minutes, what I can say is that obviously the Eastern Partnership will be reviewed. So Anna said, is it gonna stay as we know it? Probably not. But I don't think that's a bad thing. I think as we move forward towards the EU, reviewing of the formats which are there, it's natural, it's good. And I think we need to understand that we're now in a strictly geopolitical thinking modus operandi, so to say. Eastern Partnership initially was conceived as a geopolitical idea. It was in the follow-up of the Georgia-Russia war in 2008. And I remember very well at that time how Sikorsky and Carl Bildt were trying to push forward this idea that, yes, after the war and after Russia's aggression, EU needed to respond. And to respond in a way that would give more opportunities to the countries which were either attacked, like Georgia, or which were, potentially in a very dangerous neighborhood, as then the history showed. And so the Eastern Partnership was born out of that fear and out of that understanding within the European Union. Now, you fast forward a decade, what we see is that it has more or less served its purpose. in a good understanding, not in terms of it has become redundant, in terms of it actually brought those countries within the Eastern Partnership who actually wanted to use the opportunities that it gave through the association, visa liberalization, DCFTA, and then the ones that didn't want to use this opportunity, they stayed where they were. I mean, the EU is not in the modus of making anybody do the reforms or move forward. So I think what is going to happen now, or what is actually happening now, is that there will be a certain reviewing of this approach. And as I said, it's going to be a geopolitical decision. I think we are now in the time frame when these decisions are being made or will be made within the next few months. I think in June, the horizon will become more or less clear. And it will depend on whether the geopolitical step that the EU will make will be small or will be big and strong. And we all know what are the potential scenarios. One scenario is that nothing happens with regard to the applications. I overrule this scenario because if that happens, it's going to be an end not just to the Eastern Partnership, but also to this whole idea that Europe can respond to the Russia's aggression with the integration process. So let's not discuss that. And then there are two other scenarios, which are similar in a way. One is that those three countries which applied will receive the European perspective, and plus a set of conditionalities which will lead them towards the candidate status. So that's one. And the other one will be they all receive, or part of them receive, like Ukraine receives candidate status, and then there will be conditionality towards the next steps. So whichever of this is the case, I think it will that approach will have already transformed the Eastern Partnership as we know it now, because there will be a big carrot in the room that the countries will know whether that carrot is the candidate status towards which we need to do some things, or whether that carrot is opening of the accession negotiations. So one way or another, there will be, come June, there will be a lot of things that those countries who want to move fast on the EU track will have to do. And that links the Eastern Partnership more than ever towards the democratic transformation. And we don't have to invent a bicycle here. I think if you look at the conditionalities which have been given to the Balkan states, we can pretty much assume, we can pretty much guess what will be on the table. This will be judiciary, it will be media, it will be power sharing, it will be other reforms like tackling corruption, making state institutions more efficient. It will be elections. In Georgia's case, I would probably add the political persecutions and depolarization. But in general, it's known what are going to be the conditions. What I hope is that the European Union, come June, will be very clear about the concrete things that need to be done, and will sway away from the general approach which has been the case sometimes when they just say we need accountable judiciary, or we need something, but it's not really clear what exactly needs to be done. So I think it's going to be in the European Union's hand. And so the EU makes that what I call a strong geopolitical step, and then follows up on that. It will have a huge transformative power for this region. And obviously it will happen within the wider framework of the Eastern Partnership, but because it's going to be an enlargement track, and once again, I hope that enlargement track will be launched in June, whether it is with the immediate candidate status and then conditionality or reversed, does not matter. It will still be an enlargement track. So once that happens, it will be a serious dramatic change in this neighborhood. Now, that will also have, I think, a very serious influence on a wider region, and particularly on Armenia, because if Armenia sees that actually European Union is becoming serious about the European Union enlargement, and there are things that need to be done for that to happen. And once again, understand that this happened in a geopolitical context where EU is actually countering Russia's influence in this neighborhood. That could be a game changer also for Armenia. But I would go further. I think it could also be a game changer for the residents or the authorities of the occupied regions, whether it's Abkhazia or South Ossetia, maybe to a lesser extent, but still, because so far the credibility of the European integration was not there for those people who live there, who are very much exposed to disinformation campaigns, who are very much, who live under the Russian rule. But I think that will change if the EU actually pushes forward this enlargement agenda. So it will have a dramatic geopolitical implication for the region, once again, depending on what is the decision in June. And the final point, in any case, I think the expectations will need to be managed. I think the biggest problem that, or the biggest negative development we can anticipate is that sometimes in Georgia there are quite high expectations, and these expectations are often politicized, and the pro-Russian groups are often striving with that. They often use this disappointment with the European Union, or a criticism that comes from the European Union is then used well to boost the pro-Russian narrative. So I think those are the things that will have to be managed. But in any case, the bottom line is that if the EU makes that decision with regard to the candidate status or the conditionality leading to the candidate status, it will be a whole new game, particularly in Georgia, because then it will become clear that you can't really get away just with the nice words without actually doing the homework. And so, yeah, it's gonna, I often use this word, it's going to straitjacket in a way those political forces who want to just capitalize to maintain power or to receive power, and without actually, making country more pro-European and actually moving forward on the European integration track. I think I'm just going to stop here. 5 minutes, I can't really add much more with this, but I'll come back with other comments later.
Thank you very much, Sergey. You indeed raised some important points that I would like to come back afterwards, but let me now move to our next speaker, Sonia. The same question also goes to you. We see that there is a need to revise the Eastern Partnership, but how can it be done by the EU with the involvement of the partner countries as well will be interesting to hear. But also with the associated trio applying for the membership, where does this leave other countries? Countries like Armenia, it was touched a bit also previously during our event, but also Azerbaijan, and what about Belarus as well, which has been sanctioned as a result of its actions in the war against Ukraine. Thank you, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Anna, and many thanks to the Georgian Institute of Politics for inviting me to this very timely discussion. Let me start by saying that the Eastern Partnership suffered from an unclear vision right from the start. While some member states saw it as a way to seriously deepen relationships with the participating countries, and indeed saw it as a major political initiative, as Sergey said, others saw it as an alternative to a membership perspective for those who might want or already wanted it back then. And I think this in the end left the EAP to be a technocratic and development-oriented initiative, which avoided the politics of relations between the EU and the participating states. And thus it was unable to provide answers to some of the biggest problems in the region. And I believe that we cannot continue this way with the membership applications of Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova, and of course the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think that already since early 2021, we have been seeing an uptick in understanding on the part of the EU of a more political role, of the need for a more political role, which has become visible in its role in the mediation in the Georgian domestic conflict between the government and the opposition, and also its increasing involvement as a mediator in the Karabakh and Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict. And notably, both of these initiatives took place outside of the framework of the Eastern Partnership, and or at least not clearly within the framework of the Eastern Partnership. And now, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the EU's response to it, as well as the membership applications, I think it looks almost impossible to subsume the 6 Eastern Partnership countries under the umbrella of one program if we want the relations between the EU and these very different states with very different development trajectories, at least in the short term, to provide relevant answers to the challenges that these countries face. So I think in the first place, it is critical to think about how the EU can rethink its approach to the neighborhood and not to how to preserve the Eastern Partnership, so to say. And if we are honest, I think engagement with the Azerbaijani and Belarusian governments has never been about democratization and good governance, simply because these governments have never been interested in genuine democratic reforms. So I think, you already said, Anna, that Belarus is not a member of the Eastern Partnership anymore. Anyway, I think working on democracy with these two countries is not really promising, and conditionality is not an option, as these are not partnerships on the basis of shared values. So I think with both Belarus, even more so because it's not formally even included in the Eastern Partnership anymore, but also with Azerbaijan, I think the priority should be on working with civil society, from these countries, and also with diaspora activists, as well as supporting exchange on education, issues of sustainability, climate change, etc., which I think remains relevant and is important to do even in this situation. But most of all, I think from an EU perspective, we need strategic patience. We need to deepen our knowledge of these countries, because there will be a change at some point, I think, and we need to be ready for it. Regarding Armenia, I think we need to acknowledge that Armenia is particularly vulnerable at this point. After the Velvet Revolution, it did see democratization efforts, but also, as has already been said, lots of domestic conflict and attempts at rollback also at the moment with these protests in Yerevan, and of course military conflict with Azerbaijan's attempted and partial success in reconquering previously Armenian-held territories. And there has been lots of disappointment, which I also feel on the part among our partners and interlocutors in Armenia, lots of disappointment with the EU's lack of engagement. But as I already said, the EU is getting more strongly involved and more politically involved. But I think we also need to be realistic about what is possible for Armenia, which is very dependent on Russia, both economically and security-wise, and also and politically as well, and is actually, I think, more vulnerable to Russian pressure than ever, even though the EU is becoming more active. And we have seen 2 weeks ago, approximately, that Pashinyan and Putin declared that they would conclude new agreements, for example, on security cooperation and intelligence sharing. And I think this is not very promising, and this might not even be what the Armenian government wants to do, but I think they have little options at this point. Nevertheless, we see that, for example, in the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, Eastern Partnership Index, that Armenia is actually ahead of Georgia in some of the reform issues. And I think this is one of the reasons why Armenia shouldn't be left behind. It's in a very difficult place, but the government does deserve support, and most of all, those who advocate for democracy in Armenia deserve support and not to be left behind at this point. For Georgia, Sergei has already said that, there will probably be there will be a need to attach some sort of conditions to the membership application bid, respectively its approval by the European Union, because we have seen actually for the last 2 years that EU-Georgia relations have worsened. There is very much doubt about the Georgian government's credible commitment to democratic reforms and also European values in some ways. I think this conditionality will need to include, as Sergei said, judicial reforms and respect for judicial independence, but also, more broadly speaking, credible commitment to democratic values, decrease of inflammatory rhetoric on the part of political representatives of the ruling party, ensuring independence of cultural institutions and the media, and so on. And I won't talk about Moldova and Ukraine now because we have better experts on them in this round, but maybe briefly about the problem that still is there, namely consensus finding and decision making within the European Union, because I'm not sure that the EU will be able to seize this historic moment we are at. I hope so, but I think we have some reasons for doubt. Even in Germany, it is not clear whether the government supports Georgia's membership bid, for example, or candidacy bid. And unfortunately, Germany has always been a passive to hesitant player with regard to deepening integration politically. And I think this has to do with several things. One is lack of knowledge about Eastern Europe beyond Russia, resulting lack of interest and solidarity. But also, and I think we shouldn't underestimate that, a genuine fear of confronting Russia on the part of the broader population, but also politicians, confronting Russia and possible negative consequences for Germany, but also for the countries that seek to deepen integration. And I think this might not get better with the Russian government having now announced that it sees officially also, which I mean was discussed before, but now officially sees EU as the same kind of threat as NATO. And I think a bigger, or not a bigger, but also a very big problem is that the German government, even at this point, and also many politicians, unfortunately, haven't understood the value and importance of political communication, which is a big problem for its international relations, and we really need to get better here. And then the last point, there is, I think, legitimate fear of widening the EU at the expense of deepening it. And so the need for reforms within the EU and its decision-making processes in order to keep the EU functional. But I think we have to do this in parallel with the enlargement processes that have been kicked off and that have been ongoing and now have been accelerated. But then, of course, Germany is not the only skeptic. We know that, for example, France is skeptical too, and Macron a couple of days ago made a statement, a suggestion for a political community, which sounded like a great proposal, but might in fact be a suggestion for another enlargement light format. So we have to be a bit cautious here. And yeah, in sum, I'm not sure whether the EU will be able to seize this historic moment, although I think it is very much necessary. And regarding the Eastern Partnership, I think it can remain a platform for exchange between the 6 countries, governments, in 5 governments and societies and the EU, which is important. But I think more important now is that bilateral engagement tailored to the needs and very specific political situations of the 4 countries with which the EU has the closest political relations, and especially the 3 that submitted membership bids is now crucial. And here also the strong inclusion of civil society in all these processes.
Thank you very much, Sonia, for raising the key issues. I'm going to come back afterwards on also Macron's proposal, because I had the question about that and you have already raised it, but I think it's also important to discuss it in this panel. Now I'm happy to see that we were joined by Dmytro Shulga from Kiev. Thank you very much for being here with us on this panel. We've been discussing the very big and complex question of the future of the Eastern Partnership in the context of Russia's war against Ukraine, and Sonia in her opening speech mentioned that the Eastern Partnership has suffered from unclear vision from the beginning. Dmytro, I would like to give floor to you and ask, do we see now the emergence of the vision from the European Union towards Ukraine, but also towards the rest of the countries of the Eastern Partnership? Is it now a potential to see that there will be a more strategic approach from the EU towards the countries such as Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova who applied for the membership? Please, Dmytro, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and sorry for being late. I just had to be at the meeting with our grantees whom we supported for doing maybe now most important tasks. It's number of organizations volunteering to provide help to those in need in Ukraine, to soldiers, to their families, to families of fallen soldiers, to people living in occupation, people living on the front line, people fleeing from the war, IDPs and so on. So kind of there's really immense activities of civil society responding to this huge challenge which we are having now. Basically, it's really in this or that way, war is touching, of course, every citizen of Ukraine, and it is remarkable resilience what we have seen, but still, it is far from over. It is far from being decided. And I think if we are talking about Eastern Partnership future, I think not only Eastern Partnership future, but probably future of of many things. I mean, I don't want to sound too Ukraine-centric, but I think the war, the outcome of the Russia-Ukraine war will decide also the fate of European security, of the European continent as a whole, and not only European, but also I think will have wide range, also is already having wide-ranging global consequences. Maybe not directly felt in other parts of the world, but there will be, and that's why if we are talking about European Union's approach to the Eastern Partnership, we can reflect on that. I think it is really worth reflecting. We can, just for that sake, we can come back to the beginning of the Eastern Partnership as such. The initiative was suggested in 2008, actually before the Russia-Georgia war, but got momentum after that war. And obviously, I think we can probably now, it is absolutely obvious for everyone that the West in general, European Union in particular, has not really learned a lesson from that war. And that's why we are very much because of that, we are now having this war in Ukraine of much bigger scale and consequences. And that's we can look at how European Union, what was the role in mediating the ceasefire in Georgia, what was Nicolas Sarkozy's approach and role, what was all this monitoring of the ceasefire and how it is really implemented. Same thing for Ukraine. We have war. We have had war since 2014. We have had, unlike in Georgian case, but since 2014, the European Union responded with some sanctions on the occupied Crimea, and since escalation in the Donbass also, and MH17 fall, also on some sectoral sanctions against Russian Federation. But obviously it was not enough. Obviously it was not enough response to, I mean, it was obvious that Russian was going increasingly militaristic, increasingly authoritarian, increasingly aggressive, and still a lot of investments were coming to Russia, a lot of engagement, diplomatic engagement, whatever. So and now I think that quite a lot of things now kind of started to change, but still it is not really finally decided, as I understand. Kind of. So this reflection on what it is, what does it mean, what the Russian aggression against Ukraine, what the war means now for the attitude towards Ukraine and Eastern Partnership and Russia, it is still in the process of really kind of re-perceptions and reconsiderations. We will see, we're already seeing some good moments of response. of course, with the increase in sanctions against Russian Federation. Still, the energy sanctions, most important ones, are being yet not decided upon because of particular position of Hungary. And by the way, here we see also a situation when European Union was very much kind of reaching out to the region of Eastern Partnership, basically outside of the European Union, with approach towards promoting democratic values, also approaches towards promoting foreign policy alignment in a way, and economic integration with the European Union. But we see that there have been quite a lot of inconsistencies, and these inconsistencies are now very much seen inside the European Union. With Hungary, actually, we know that in terms of democratic development, there are a lot of questions about Hungary, a member of the European Union, who is part of decision-making about assessing the level of democratic values in our countries. There is also inconsistency with, have been discussed, inconsistency with Germany developing very strong ties, especially in the energy field, with Russia. I just would like to remind you that Nord Stream 2 was launched, Nord Stream 1 was launched in 2011, right? So after Georgian war, and Nord Stream 2 was launched, the build-up of Nord Stream 2 was launched in 2015. So after Russia annexed Crimea. It didn't prevent German business from engaging, not only German, by the way, but first of all, German, engaged in that strategic exercise, strategic project with the Russian Federation, with Putin, with state-owned company Gazprom. So we all know all those hypocrisies, and still it is kind of, I think there is a shadow of it, and it is still making implications on the strategic debates we are having now in the European Union. We look at the public opinion in the European Union member states changed very much. Really, it is a sea change if we look at the public opinion. I just would like to refer to the Eurobarometer recent data, recently published last week, data from April opinion poll in all member states on attitudes towards Ukraine and towards measures against Russian Federation. And these public opinion poll results show incredible unity among virtually all European member states, among all European societies, that they do feel sympathy towards Ukraine. They do support Ukraine. 66% of European Union citizens support EU membership for Ukraine. 66% across the European Union, and across all EU member states, it's more than 50%, except for Hungary. Again, an interesting case, but in Hungary, it's still 48%. It is still a relative majority because there are a considerable part undecided. So even in such countries, kind of traditionally, and we know that they have been traditionally skeptical, and still the politicians and political elites are still not decided. Like in France and Netherlands and Germany, it is still, in France, it's 56% French citizen for Ukraine to be member of the European Union. In Germany, it's 61, in Netherlands, 62%. Again, Netherlands, which used to have a consultative referendum on ratifying EU-Ukraine Association Agreement, it failed in 2016. There was a negative answer, but well, low turnout, and kind of it was not obligatory, it's consultative, but still kind of it was skeptical, and public opinion was skeptical. Now we see that public opinion has changed dramatically, but we don't see yet this confident change in the political elites in their positions. And this is really a big question, whether the political elites of the European Union will be up to the task to seize this historical moment, as Sonia mentioned. And I think that this is really, I mean, either the European Union will be able to do that, or it will become increasingly irrelevant. I think that there are several changes now, several challenges now. First of all, really to be to have this unity inside European Union member states. This Hungarian blocking energy sanctions against Russian Federation under all possible pretexts. It's really unacceptable, I think, for European Union to be a foreign policy actor. You have to have foreign policy alignment. And by the way, this also makes some implications for when we discuss future enlargement. You can't have accession process with a country which wants to remain in tense relationship with Russia, like Serbia, for instance. I mean, foreign policy alignment should be part of the criteria. I think this is, should be one of implications for what needs to be changed in this enlargement process. Otherwise, unity of the European Union and its ability to function as a foreign policy actor will be under question. Second is really, I think Macron, well, all this, there was a recent article on Politico. Basically, Anglosphere is defending European security right now, while European Union is trying to defend itself, trying to defend its role in this whole context. Let's be frank. I think what we have seen, how situation developed in Ukraine, how the war started, how response was from various states. We have seen that Anglo-Saxon world was really quick in response and firm in response, plus Eastern European countries. While France now trying to come back to suggest again some sort of European sovereignty, autonomy, political union, all those artificial constructions which are not credible, really. It is not really credible to expect from that when you have been so undecided whether to support Ukraine, whether to support basically European security, because Ukraine is not only defending itself, it's very clear, absolutely clear that Russia, if Russia is not stopped in Ukraine, it was not stopped in Georgia. Now, if it is not stopped in Ukraine, it will go further. It will go to Baltics, it will go wherever it will be stopped. So now with these discussions of, again, President Macron, I mean, I really hope that he will be able, he will consider that his historic mission as a leader of one of key European Union member state is actually to be up to the task and to reconsider European approach and really to move European Union to be up to the historical moment. And the European Union is really in a unique position in many ways. And this is, I think, a test for all of us, whether we will be able, whether we will be successful in integration of those Eastern Partnership countries willing to integrate with the European Union. I would like to remind you that Ukraine has not started its integration process with application to the EU. The process was a bit different. First of all, well, there were decades already, I would say, of going closer to the European Union. Even before Eastern Partnership was launched, even before Association Agreement started to be discussed, there were action plan of the European neighborhood policy and approximation of some part of legislation and things like this. But then, crucially, we have had, for 8 years, we have had Association Agreement and implemented it with the DCFTA, with the immense approximation process. So it is not like from scratch. It's not from the beginning that we have application of Ukraine to the European Union. I think there is kind of consensus among not only government of Ukraine, but also of civil society, even those parts of civil society who is kind of always has been critical to Ukrainian government on various aspects. But I think there is universal consensus also among those parts of civil society that Ukraine objectively is on the level of a candidate state to the European Union. So really, it is not fully there. We cannot say, of course, that we are ready for EU membership right away. It's clear, not so. It will take probably some years, but we hope that it will not stay in a limbo for decades, like for some countries who have been stuck in that process and kind of not going anywhere. So we are expecting very much a decision of the European Union Council, of the leaders of the European Union in June. We are expecting, first of all, of course, opinion of the European Commission in May. I heard that it is expected by the end of May. Ukraine responded to the questionnaire European Commission has sent to it, to all the questionnaire already. So it's not only to the first part of it, but also to the second part of it. So basically, almost the same standard questionnaire which has been sent to Western Balkan countries, who have been responding to that questionnaire in many, many months, almost a year in some cases, or more than a year. Ukraine was able to respond less than in a month to answer all these questions. And as far as I heard from sources from Brussels, they are these were qualitative responses. So it shows that there is capacity, there is a real level of preparedness and real level of expertise. And it is remarkable that in the time of war, Ukrainian institutions showing this level of resilience. So maybe I will stop here. I would like to again underline that we are now discussing with various partners, contacts, friends in the European Union, our ambitious agenda and expectation from the June European Council, and hope very much that this reflection of the historical moment and what has been done wrong, what was wrong with European policies in recent decades should translate into more decisiveness, more strategic approach and readiness to act now by the European Union in these circumstances. Some shifts has been made already. We see, for instance, like delivery of weapons to Ukraine increasingly going on, but still we are not yet feeling that we are fully there. And I hope very much that European politicians will be able to respond and to prove that European Union as a unity, as a union, remains relevant and up to the tasks, up to the challenges it faces in foreign policy and security. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dmytro, for your insightful intervention. As we have reached our time limit, I'm going to quickly jump ahead of one round of the questions and ask our speakers to maybe dedicate just 1 minute to shortly answer the questions from the audience. There is one question to Sonia from Grigoryan asking, do you not think that passive approach to the EIP countries while waiting for them meeting the demands of conditionality would lead them ending up in Russian sphere of influence? Is it not a high time to make political decisions and proactively push them into the EU to prompt them to meet the terms of conditionality? There is a question from Jelger Grodnoverd on EU candidate status on Georgia, and this I will ask Sergei to kindly answer it. The question asks, will the candidate status for Georgia be a stronger conditional stick to hold it to reform commitments in which it has been lacking association agreements, see judicial reforms? And I would add to this question, to what extent the government would be ready to uphold the strict conditionality linked to the potential membership status given by the EU possibly in June. And last question, and this will be also to all the speakers, and this is the question about the associated trio. What is the future of the associated trio, and also future in terms of their cooperation among each other as they go ahead and advance in terms of European integration, also in the context of the war and the foreign policy approaches of the countries to the war. Thank you, and maybe we can start with Sonia in this case, and then we move to next speakers. Please make your interventions 1 2 minute maximum as we wrap up this panel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anna, and thank you for those interesting questions. First of all, about the question in the chat, whether I don't think that a passive approach to the Eastern Partnership countries or associate trio would lead them ending up in the Russian sphere of influence. I think it's definitely a legitimate concern. And as I said, I'm not in favor of blocking the membership bids at all. In contrast, I'm in favor of approving them. But I do think that it's not wise from an EU perspective to fast track all these applications and move towards membership without fulfillment of the criteria. And especially in the Georgian case, there are serious doubts about the position of the Georgian government and its adherence to European values and the Copenhagen criteria. So I don't think that linking or tying the approval of the membership bid to certain conditions is a passive approach, but I think it's actually a very political approach, and an approach which can be beneficial for both sides, namely for the EU in terms of not admitting a new member which doesn't exhibit a credible commitment to democracy, and also for Georgia, and most of all for the Georgian society, because it will mean a push for democratization if the EU adheres to this strong conditionality. And regarding the future of the associated trio, I think there is a future for the associated trio, not only for cooperation between the governments, although of course there are some difficulties now between Georgian and Ukrainian official representatives, but I think that this hopefully will be overcome at some point, and there is still some space for exchange on how to approach the EU with common demands and how to deal with the accession process, and which will hopefully start. And also for civil society, I think this exchange will be very important because we have seen already when the membership bids were submitted that this exchange between civil society was helpful for example, Georgian civil society to pressure the government on releasing the questionnaire and these kind of issues. So I think it's still remains important, but I think it will be very important once the membership bids are approved with or without conditions, that there will be also exchange with countries that have been on the accession track for some time, so the Western Balkan countries, and also countries that joined the EU during the last 10-20 years, because these countries can also share their experiences, and especially civil society in these countries can share experiences of what could go better maybe in these accession processes. Thank you for this discussion.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Sergey, would you please reflect on the question in the chat about whether the candidate status will be stronger conditional incentive for Georgian government, and also the capacity of the government to implement the necessary reforms? Thank you.
Yeah, I think certainly it will be stronger conditional stake. There was not that much conditionality in the association agreement. I think the real question is whether this is going to be strong enough to to help the government or to push the government to actually do some of the things that they should have done long ago, but they must do now if they want to proceed further. So I think that is the big question. Is it going to be strong enough? Now, if you ask me, deep in my heart, I really want to get to have Georgia receive the candidate status without any conditions, and then to have conditions linked to the start of the accession negotiations. But I also understand what would be the negative repercussion of that, in that it could actually backfire, it could actually pacify the government, it could actually encourage the government not to do things because they could believe that they've been doing everything so far. And that's why they got the candidate status. Whereas we all know that the application and all these decisions, they are linked to Ukraine. Ukraine now is a locomotive, and we have kind of bandwagon Ukraine. So that's the reality. And so I think, the EU has a chance to impose these strong conditionalities and then to follow up on them and to be more active in demanding that certain things are met. And by virtue of this process being enlargement process, there will be a big carrot in the room for sure, because that is the accession. So that will straitjacket the government. So I think there are more chances, but simply by putting it on the paper and not following up diplomatically or following up bilaterally is not going to change much. So a lot will depend on how that bilateral follow-up is done from the side of the European Union.
Thank you very much, Sergey. And last but not least, Dmitro, would you, what is your opinion about the future of the associated trio? We know that they have, there has been a memorandum in recent years between the three countries regarding their advanced cooperation in terms of European integration, but also between each other. As the membership applications were made and there is an anticipation of the EU's decision, what will be the dynamic between these countries as they advance in European integration, in your opinion? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, basically three countries share the same goal, and that's why it's logical they should cooperate. We have been discussing this for quite a while. It's just a moment. We have been discussing this for quite a while, and actually, together with Sergey, together with some other colleagues, we have started thinking of expert suggestions, what concrete steps can be taken apart from or beyond mere declarations of mutual support and things like this, and mutual positioning towards the European Union. I think there is a lot of potential in developing concrete projects. But there is one biggest problem right now, that all those projects, all those ideas can be implemented after the war is over, after Russian aggression is over, after Ukraine gets back its territories, and after Black Sea, by the way, as well, is free of occupation. Right now, Black Sea waters of Ukraine are basically occupied or blocked by the Russian Navy. And that's why we cannot basically explore any sort of connectivity on the maritime field from Ukraine. We see that the war impacts both Georgia and Moldova as well. Moldova very much now up because of possible threats from Transnistria. With Georgia, we have seen kind of some not really, I would say, full alignment, diplomatically speaking, of Georgian government position with the Ukrainian one. And there were some declarations here, an exchange of declarations. I know that as far as I can judge from what has been said publicly, I can understand that even in the Georgian government, there's no one universal opinion, but kind of different opinions. And we definitely feel great sympathy and solidarity from the Georgian society. And definitely everyone in Ukraine knows that there are Georgian volunteers who are fighting, literally fighting now on the front line for Ukraine. And this is really a kind of immense show of solidarity, a demonstration of solidarity in arms in these times. But coming back to the basic principle, again, we're discussing applications to the European Union. I think that everyone should be considered according to its own merit. This is fair. So when we say that this or that country, I don't know, kind of that, I hear this many times from the European Union people, that kind of Balkans have been waiting for so long, so we cannot accept trio ahead of Balkans. I mean, I think that each country should be treated really according to its merit and according to the level of meeting the criteria, including the foreign policy criteria, which I mentioned, the foreign policy alignment with the European Union. So if Bosnia and Herzegovina has really constitutional mess, we cannot wait for Bosnia to amend its constitution and to be integrated to the European Union, and because of that, to stop not to allow Ukraine to proceed, I think it's not fair. The same for Kosovo, let's say, I mean, which is not yet recognized by all European member states. We cannot wait for Kosovo to be recognized by all European member states and not to give Ukraine on that precondition to give Ukraine a membership, a candidate status now and accession talks opening. So I think here and we know all other stuff kind of with there is really various sorts of absolutely different problems with the Balkans, with Serbian government pro-Russian, with Macedonia being blocked first by Greece, now by Bulgaria. Again, I mean, it's not because of our fault, it's because of some other reasons why it is not proceeding. So I think it is not fair to block our countries if we meet the criteria. It's really if, I mean, I cannot call, and Ukrainian civil society is not calling for some privilege here. We just ask for fair treatment. If we're meeting the criteria, please accept us, and don't give some, I don't know, whatever is, I mean, there's really kind of big suspicion that still this, I mean, if there is still a Russian argument here, then it is really a total disaster. So if there is still argumentation influenced from in some European Union circles that we cannot integrate Ukraine because of Russia is perceiving it as a threat, then it is total disaster. That it doesn't mean it means that those people didn't learn the lesson even now. So if they don't, I don't know. I don't want to imagine what should happen for them to change their mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dmytro, and also my big thanks goes to all the panelists who have intervened today, also the members of the audience who asked their questions. We exceeded our time limit, and apologies for that, but I think it was extremely interesting to hear the opinions and the interventions of our speakers. To summarize very shortly, I think all the speakers today have agreed that it is a high time for the European Union to change its unclear vision to the more strategic vision towards the region, and also towards the countries who have strongly committed to their European aspirations and shown the motivations on that path. And also, as Dmytro highlighted, the new polls that from Eurobarometer, the dramatic change in European opinions of the European society should probably be reflected also in the policies of their governments. We've seen unprecedented transnational solidarity across the world as the war broke in February, and we will see now in June there is much pressure on the event in June from the European Council and its decisions, how the relations with the associated countries will be going on in future, but also what will be the EU's response, not only just with sanctions, but also with the decisions on the membership applications in the context of the war. So with this in mind, thank you very much. And now I give floor to Renata to final comments.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone who contributed to the discussion today. It seems indeed many of the questions that we raised today, they are still to be answered in the future. And who knows, hopefully in a year from now or some period of time from now, we will be sitting in a very different context and discussing this in the past tense, both the war and hopefully with the candidate status already approved. And well, we can all, of course, dream and hope for the best. Before we turn this on, I would like to give a floor to our partners, to Dr. Stepan, Grigoryan, and Julian Groza for a final words, as this is the final event, not final remarks, not just for the event, but also of the project and the series of these meetings. So, dear Stepan.
Dear Renata, first of all, I would like to say my gratefulness our partners from Georgia and Moldova. Thank you, Corneli Kakachias. Thank you, Julian Groza. Thank you, Renata. We together realized very interesting project. It's very important to understand what the situation we have in our countries, a developing process. In the world, we see so tension situation, aggressions, Russia against Ukraine, and so on. Everything has serious influence on our countries. Why? So type meetings, conferences, projects are very important to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you once again, Renata, Corneli, for the work you have done in managing the whole process over the last year. Indeed, I think, as rightly mentioned, also by our friends and partners, I think we have largely advanced in achieving our primary goal of the project. I think we managed to ensure more evidence-based inputs from our community of think tanks from our countries, targeting indeed the outstanding areas, issues like good governance, rule of law, justice, and security dimension, tailored to the needs and the capacities that we have in our countries. But more importantly, I think we managed to facilitate this policy dialogue, multi-stakeholder policy dialogue. And I think we managed to raise, I think, the awareness of a need to an empowered and enhanced EU policy towards strengthening our resilience in the country, in our countries. But generally, I think I'm looking forward, like all of you here, I'm looking forward to continue our work and cooperation, because our work is not stopping with this event, for sure. We have managed to develop multiple partnerships within the project, but beyond the project as well, I think, which creates more opportunities to continue our joint work. I think we have a lot more to do, again, to be more effective, more efficient, and to reach out to our partners and peers in EU member states. I think this is something that we will definitely continue, as we have discussed in this event, that the Eastern Partnership policy and region and EU in general, will face most likely in the immediate future a process of reflection of how to adapt better the policies towards the new challenges and crises our countries and region is impacted by. So thank you very much once again. Thank you for all of those who have been active into these debates and discussions, and of course, thank you very much to our partners, moderators, who managed to, I think, do a very great job and contribute to our event. Thank you.
Thank you once again. And with this, I would like to close today's event and look forward to seeing you in the future discussions, both live and online as well. Thank you, and have a nice day.